At the end of our weekly reading, Parshat Chayei, the Torah tells about Yishmael, who had 12 tribes, somewhat similar to the Jewish 12 tribes. There were 12 tribes of the Ishmaelites, 12 princes, and it also mentions that he lived among his brothers. This was a blessing, of course, that at some point his mom, Hagar, got from an angel. The word nafal, al pnei kol echav nafal, according to some interpretations, means he dwelt, basically. He dwelt among his brothers. So some commentators say that's talking about bnei Ketura. So the other children of Avraham, Avinu, the 6 children he had from Ketura, those nations ultimately mixed with the nations of Ishmaelites. Today, the people who we call Arabs, or who themselves identify as Arabs, generally speaking, they say that they are descendants of Ishmael. Now, I don't think that all of them are direct descendants of Ishmael, but probably some of them are. And in general, a lot of times a nation is formed based on certain similarities within that nation: language, culture, religion. So sometimes maybe the percentage of the actual DNA of the specific nation is less than half, but since the nation is all together and the people who come in, they kind of assimilate within that nation, so it's all considered one nation. So whatever the case may be, our sages also considered the nation of Yishmael to be mixed in particular with the nations of Ketura, the descendants of Ketura, the last wife of Avraham, the concubine of Avraham, from whom 6 sons were born, and apparently they all became nations eventually. So one of the interesting corollaries is everybody knows that Arabs also have some circumcision. There are, of course, many people in various countries who circumcise for health reasons. In America, most males are circumcised. But I'm talking about as a religious precept. From what I understand, it's just the Jews and the Arabs who have this type of a religiously ordained circumcision. And what's really interesting is that one might think that this is just the point of view of Arabs on their own, that that's what they do. But it turns out, according to Rambam, the Maimonides, Arabs are correct in circumcising even according to Jewish law, meaning that when the sons of Ketura were born, already Avram by that time was given the commandment of circumcision. And therefore, they and their descendants have to be circumcised. And the Rambam writes that since Bnei Ketura got mixed with Bnei Ishmael, the children of Ketura and the children of Ishmael all became ultimately one nation, therefore they all have to be circumcised, since at least some of them are descendants of Ketura. And probably there were other nations that also got mixed into all of this. So the interesting thing is that when, before World War I, for hundreds of years, there was this huge empire based on Turkey, Ottoman Empire, that included huge nations that did not have any independence. These were Arabs who were under the Turks for centuries and centuries. And Turks, of course, even though they're Muslim, they are a different culture and a different nationality, and they're not Arabs at all. So when the Allies won the World War I, at that time Turkey was on the side of Germany. So they conquered all these lands and decided to make on the entire territory, on about 98 to 99% of the territory, would be Arab states, independent Arab states, and only on about 1% of that territory would be a Jewish state, with a Jewish majority and Arab minority. That would be the one place where the Jews would have their own state. At that time, what would become later Israel was, of course, had very few people altogether. It was underdeveloped, there was a lot of free space, and there would be a possibility for Jews to have one country of their own. And at that time, the Arabs did not accept even the 1% of the land that out of 99% that was given to them. They wanted the whole thing. Not a single place did they allow that the Jews would have their own state. And then of course, after World War II, eventually only on part of that land was the state of Israel given a chance, with specifically the Arabs given so much land already, and even in the state of Israel, the Arabs would have been able to, those who already lived there, would have been able to continue to live there if the war did not start. The Declaration of Independence mentioned that we invite the Arabs to become full citizens of Israel. But guess what? They wanted the whole thing, they bet on the whole thing, and they tried to destroy the small Israel at that time. And when they lost the battle, then already became the problem of so-called Palestinian refugees. At that time they weren't called Palestinians yet, they were just called Arab refugees, but later on the nation was created kind of out of those Arabs that lived in the land of Israel for even shortest time. If they lived before Israel for 2 years, they're already considered Palestinian refugees, even though they came from Syria or from Egypt or from wherever. If they lived for 2 years before the war, that already makes them the local population kind of, and that makes them the refugees forever and ever for all generations. Something that did not happen in any other case in history. Whenever there are refugees, the refugees are only the people who left a certain place, not the people, not their descendants. And in every other case, UN is trying to settle the refugees, and in this particular case, they keep them and their children and their grandchildren, a special organization in UN, UNRWA, just busy with the so-called Palestinian refugees. Really unbelievable situation that the people who tried to make another Holocaust are considered the victims. Imagine, for example, if the Germans after World War II, those ones that became refugees and ended up in Germany, instead of Germany absorbing them, it would open a special organization, and UN would be supporting them in special camps for generations to come, and would call them a separate nationality, let's say Prussians, the Prussians living in the camps near what used to be Königsberg, that's Kaliningrad, and many other cities that are now Poland, Czechia, Russia, that used to be part of Germany. Right? It was always accepted, and it was the norm that after some country starts the war, they do lose territory and they do have refugees. This is just the way of the world. Otherwise, they would continue the war and they would try it again and again, as of course the Arabs in fact promised. And if Israel would have let in all those people who left at the time of the War of Independence, then there would be no Israel. They would just simply destroy it. But Israel kept those Arabs who stayed, and those who left. That's it. They suffered because of the decisions that their leaders made, just like the German people suffered for the decisions that their leaders made, and nobody was having pity on the Germans. Nobody's apologizing before the Germans for all the suffering that the German people had during and after World War II. Even though, of course, there was a lot of suffering, a lot of German civilians suffered, but guess what? It's just that's the way the wars are. There's no other way out to avoid civilian suffering and to have the war that only targets Nazis. So this is the situation that a lot of people don't realize. They have everything completely reversed: the victim and the aggressor. All of a sudden, it's instead of the Arabs together as all one big nation, which it was, it became all of a sudden that there is a separate nation, the new Palestinians, that they themselves admit on record that the whole thing is used as a ploy. But this new Palestinian nation, of course, is the most suffering one. They need a special UN organization so that they and their descendants forever will be used to fight Israel. There's no other situation like that in the world ever. And even though Israel dealt with the Arabs much kinder than what the Allies did to the Germans, no comparison at all. And this was at the same time period. Imagine, no Jew was left in the parts of the land of Israel that was conquered by the Jordanians. The Western Wall, the Jewish quarter in Jerusalem, all of those places were completely left as what the Hitler would call Jewrein, right? No Jew left there. But there were plenty of Arabs who lived in the Jewish state and had full rights, and still do. But those who left, the majority of them were not accepted back, and it would be pretty stupid and suicidal for young Israel to accept back all those Arabs who left, most of whom were prone to terror and who helped terrorism and helped to destroy us, and would have destroyed us already if they would be all left back, allowed back. Obviously, Israel would not allow back such people. And there were cases on record when certain cities where the Arabs did not seem to support the fight against the Jews, that they were left alone. They were actually asked not to leave. Some of the Arabs left because they thought that let the Arab armies destroy Israel and we'll come back. But those Arabs that decided to stay, they got lucky and they are now citizens of Israel. There's of course a lot more to say on this topic. It's just incredible how unfairly most of the world, especially the leftist media, looks at it. Right? They keep saying that that they're trying to balance. So balancing between Hamas and Israel is like balancing between German propaganda and let's say what America would have to say. If during World War II Germans would be claiming, correctly by the way, that they have so many civilian casualties and things like that, certainly it would occur to nobody to quote the German Ministry of Propaganda on the same page and even giving it more weight than what the Americans are saying. Just right now, the Hamas, whatever it's doing to the Gazan people, is really horrid, and yet the blame is all on Israel. Israel is trying to save civilians, and Hamas is trying to destroy as many civilians as possible. Hamas is the one stealing aid. Hamas is the one causing hunger. Not because Israel doesn't let enough humanitarian aid in, but because Hamas is stealing it. And so many cases were documented cases where Hamas killed their own people, and is continuing to do that. I don't know if one day the Arabs in the future will thank Israel for cleaning up Hamas, for giving them another chance. The Germans are certainly, for the most part, thankful to the Americans and to Russians and to others who destroyed Hitler and the Nazi Party and gave Germany another chance. And now Germany is a very successful country. In theory, the Arabs could also, living in the land of Israel, be incredibly successful in Gaza and in other places. But for that, they have to abandon terrorism and instead look for the brighter future. As long as they continue to fight, what they call resistance, struggle, right? That's exactly what Hitler thought. Hitler also thought himself a victim. So instead of accepting World War I's loss, Germany tried to redo it. And that's where Mein Kampf is, my struggle. So they also had resistance. They also were trying to fight for what they thought was unfair. Right? A lot of monsters in this world consider themselves to be victims and consider the others to be the oppressors. So it's the same story with the so-called Palestinians. They're the ones who tried to destroy Israel in the most cruel and worst possible ways a number of times. And if Israel was able to survive each time, thank Hashem for the mercy, then it's only in order that they should at last realize that the only way for their future is to live in peace. That's the world in which most people want to live. But these people are so brainwashed, all they want is to kill the Jews. That's the only desire. That's what unites the so-called new nation of Palestinians. All they have is the desire to kill the Jews and to destroy Israel. They have nothing else that's in common. But there's no difference between them and regular Arabs. Most of them, in fact, even have last names that you could trace to the specific families. In Syria, in Egypt, Mohammed Def, that was eliminated recently, his last name was basically Egyptian, but he changed it. All of these people, they knew where they're coming from. The vast majority of the so-called Palestinians are just the Arabs who came to the land of Israel within the last 100, maybe 150 years. And at any rate, he used to be so proud of their conquest of all these areas, right? After the event of Islam, the Arabs were able to conquer many of these lands. None of these lands now have the original culture and people who live there. No Phoenicians in Lebanon, no Ammonites and Moabites in Jordan, no Aram in Syria, no Chaldeans in Babylonia, in Iraq. All of these places are new nations. It's all pan-Arab, as what they used to call pan-Arabic. It's all one big Arabic nation. The DNA might be slightly different in various places, but generally speaking, their culture, their religion, their language, everything is the same. It's all Arabs. And they conquered also the land of Israel. But during the majority of that time, the land of Israel had very little population. And only when the Jewish settlers started needing the jobs, there was more infrastructure, and in particular between the two world wars, during the British Mandate, there was more infrastructure, and at that time British used to limit Jewish immigration to the land of Israel, and at the same time used to permit as much Arab immigration as the Arabs wanted. And that's why quite a number of Arab families moved between the two world wars. And now they started to claim that they're the ancient people of Israel. Which ancient people? Canaanites, Plishtim, Philistines. All of these people were gone already by the time of Second Temple. There were no Philistines and certainly no Canaanites. Never mentioned anywhere. There's no Palestinian people until quite recently, less than 100 years ago, in the second half of 20th century. The Arabs who were until then identified themselves with regular Arabs, all of a sudden started, for political reasons, calling themselves Palestinians. But even if there were somehow special Palestinians, so they have Jordan already. The majority of people living in Jordan are so-called Palestinians. So they have already one nation, one country. But they want to have a country in the entire, between the river and the sea, as they say, in the entire land of Israel. So the Jews don't have anything. Everything will be Arab. That's the real problem. And when one side wants to kill only and the other side wants to live, there's not really much room for compromise. And on this I'm going to end. And if you like this video, please press like.